Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Metzia daf lamed hey. We have a daf with a lot of different topics, so we will work on getting through them. And just as a note, I will not be teaching on Zoom the next 2 days, so that'll be Thursday and Friday. We'll be back on Zoom on Sunday, but the regular class will be up as usual, and it'll even be up a few hours earlier. It'll go up at 5 in the morning Israel time, so if you want to get started early, you'll be able to. Okay, for some it might even be the night before. Okay, we're going to get started now with where we ended. And we have to review because there was a lot of details at the end of the daf and we didn't really know where we were going with it. So let's package it for what we need it for. Rav Huna, basically, we started with our Mishna. Our Mishna is talking about a case where, let's just take the typical case of a shomer chinam, someone who's watching for free, the object gets stolen, they can take an oath and get exempt, but they decide not to, they pay anyway. They can do that, and not only can they do that, but they gain the rights to the kefel. If, let's say, they say it was stolen and we find the thief, they will get the double payment. But Rav Huna adds that there's a bit of a concern that maybe someone's just going to want the item for themselves. And therefore, the only way to do this is if they take an oath saying it is not in my domain. Okay, so that's called the shvur she'eina b'shuti. You have to at least take this oath that it's not in my domain. So now we go to a totally different case where I loan you money and you give me your watch as collateral. And then the problem is that we have a debate. What happens is I claim I lost the watch. And we now have a debate about the value of the watch. Notice we don't have a debate about whether it's lost or not, okay? We have a debate about the value. And then we gave 4 cases. Either I claim the item was not worth the full amount of the loan and you still owe me money. And then either you fully deny or you partially deny. If you fully deny and you say, that's not true, my watch was worth exactly the amount of the loan, then you're exempt. But if you partially admit that actually, well, it was not worth, no, sorry, I said it wrong. Let's go back. Apologies. Okay, I say that the watch was worth half the amount of the loan. It doesn't matter what amount, but I say it was worth less. And you still owe me, let's say, just half the amount. We'll take the case they brought. You still owe me half the amount. And then you say, what do you mean? The watch was worth the full amount. I don't owe you anything. You lost it. You got it. It's your fault. And therefore, you already got the amount. I don't have to give you anything. Or you claim you're right. It wasn't worth the full amount, but it wasn't worth as little as I claimed. So you say it was worth 2 dinarim, and I say, you say it was worth 3 dinarim, and I say it was only worth 2. So then you're modeh b'miktzat. In that case, you have to take an oath. Now, that was the case at the end of yesterday's daf that we said, even though you're the one who's modeh b'miktzat, you admitted to part of my claim, right? You admit you owe me a dinar, but you don't think you owe me 2 dinarim. So now, normally you would take the oath. Came the braita and said, I take the oath. Why do I take the oath? Because we're worried that maybe I'm going to pull out the item after you take the oath, right? What's going to happen? You're going to take the oath and say, listen, it was worth more than you think, Michelle. And you lie and you take an oath about it. And then who I'm upset, I say, what do you mean? It really was only worth 2 dinarim. And now I pull out the item and try to prove my point. Now, because of the concern I might do that, I'm the one who has to take the oath. Because if I take the oath, I'm not going to then all of a sudden pull out the item. Okay, and the problem with if I pulled out the item would be then you swore for no reason, right? It's a shvuat shav because we actually have the object and there was no reason for the oath. Again, the commentaries debate why it would be a problem, but let's just go with that. Then we had the other 2 cases. The second 2 cases were the reverse, where you claim that you borrowed money from me and gave me a watch for collateral, and the watch was worth double the amount. And now I say the watch is lost and you want to get back your sela of money, your 4 dinarim, that basically you gave me more than what the loan was worth. And then I say, what are you talking about? And then, I'm believed. But if I say, again, if I am modeh b'miktzat and I say, well, you're right, it was worth more, but not as much as you say, then I have to take the oath. Now, then for sure I have to take the oath because I'm the one who's modeh b'miktzat and I'm the one who the pikadon is by me. So it doesn't matter. That's the basics. What does this have to do with Rav Huna? So now we're going to explain. Well, in ita l'de Rav Huna, if Rav Huna is true, and what Rav Huna says is a fact, that whenever, now this is really whenever, it's not just in the case of our Mishnah, but whenever somebody claims it's not, I lost it, it was stolen, something like that, then we always have to have them take an oath because maybe they just decided, I like it. Maybe I liked your watch and I want to keep it for myself. So if I already took an oath, which we just assume is obvious, right? The braita didn't need to mention it. It's, again, Rav Huna coming later, but the assumption is that Rav Huna thinks that was going on before also. If before this whole debate about before we got into the nitty-gritty details of how much it's worth, for starters, I have to take an oath that it's not in my property. Well, if I took an oath that it's not in my property, then why do we have to switch the oath in case number 2, right? There were 4 cases. In case number 2, we said, you're supposed to take the oath as the borrower, but since the pikadon is in my reshut and we're worried that I might just pull it out, I have to take the oath about the value of the item. If I just took an oath that it's not in my possession, then how could I somehow magically pull it out? In other words, I want to be very clear. There's 2 oaths going on here. One relates to, do I have the object? Was it lost or not? Am I just trying to take your watch because I like it? So that's one issue. The other issue is, what's the worth of the object that I claim is lost? So if first I have to take the oath claiming it was lost, then this whole concern at the end of the braita that the modib and miktzat oath that you're supposed to take goes on me. By the way, we've seen this before, that if someone's, let's say, not trusted, and there's an oath that's supposed to be taken, we put the oath on the other side, right? So it happens sometimes when we switch it. But why would we switch it to me? The whole concern we're switching it to the creditor, the one who lent the money, is because we're worried since the item was in my possession, maybe after the lova, the borrower, takes an oath, I'll pull it out. How could I possibly pull it out? I just took an oath, I don't have it. Okay, that's the issue. If I took an oath, I don't have it, which is what Rav Huna says, then there's no need to worry that I'm going to pull out the item. So now we're going to have 4 answers to this question. The first one is kind of ridiculous. You'll see in a minute why, but anyway, they want to come up with a case where I don't have to take an oath. So what case would I not have to take an oath? If it was clear I don't have it. So I'm a Rava. Now, the problem, I'll just tell you this outside because it's going to be a little confusing when you start to hear it, but they're going to try to come up with a case where I didn't need to take the oath. Why wouldn't I need to take the oath? Because it's obvious it's not in my possession. Well, then the problem's going to be, if it's obvious it's not in my possession, then why are we worried to switch the oath from you to me if we're worried I'm going to pull it out? I can't just pull it out if it's obvious it's not in my possession, okay? So that's going to be the problem with the first 2 answers, but the second one we'll be able to establish somehow. So the first one is, I'm a Rava, there are witnesses that it was burned. Okay, so that's why I don't have to take the oath. Now, obviously, the Gemara is going to say, Ihachi is like a great example of when you're learning the Gemara and you say, this makes absolutely no sense, my misunderstanding, but then you go to the next line, you realize they also think it makes no sense, so don't worry. Sometimes when you're stuck in a line in Gemara, the rule is just keep going on because they might actually address your question. So, Ihachi mehechamaitela. Well, that helped us with saying, okay, there's no oath in a bershuti, but then there would be there's no concern that the mav is going to all of a sudden pull out the watch if there's witnesses that it was burned and it doesn't even exist. Okay, so that's off the table, that answer. But now we're going to have 3 answers that actually stay on the table. Ela Amar of Yosef, sheyesh edim shenigneva. Maybe there were witnesses that it was stolen. Now, if there's witnesses that it was stolen, then I don't have to take an oath, right? Witnesses came and said the watch was stolen from my possession. If that's the case, I don't have to take an oath that it was lost or that it's not in my, that it's not in my possession because we already have proof for that. So now I didn't take the oath. So now the Gemara is going to say still. So again, now we go to stage 2, which is we're now arguing over the value of the item that was stolen. You claim 3, I claim 2, right? We have this argument. And then you're supposed to take an oath. Modeh b'miktzat. We put it on me because we're worried I'm going to pull out the item. Well, if there's witnesses it was stolen, how on earth? So, how am I going to pull out the item? Now, when it was burned, it's clear I can't pull out the item. It doesn't exist anymore. When it was stolen, though, it still exists. Maybe, right, once you take this oath that it's worth 3 shkalim and I'm now going to lose, well, I might say, let me go find that item because I don't want to lose my money. Now I have much more incentive to go find the thief and retrieve the item. So that could be. Okay, and then that's why I have to take the oath about how much it's worth so that at that point, I'm not going to go out and try to retrieve the item. I've already gotten what I wanted. So they say, well, then we have another problem though. This still doesn't really work yet. Because okay, let's go to case number 4. When you claim it was worth, right, you gave me a collateral worth double the amount and you want to get money back. And I'm moda b'miktzat. I say it was worth only 5 dinarim. You claim 8 dinarim. And then I have to take the oath. Now, if the item, originally we just assumed the item's always in the possession of the malva, and the malva is the only one we're concerned they might just pull it out. But if the item's in the party, a third party's property because somebody else stole it, well, in that case, we should switch it to you because the malva theoretically could go find the thief and get it from the thief. And in that case, perhaps we should go the reverse. And the lova should be the one to take the oath so that they don't go find it with the malva. So they say, well, bishlam malva yada. Okay, this is an interesting logic. You as the lova won't be able to find the thief. Me as the malva, I can find the thief. Why is that? Not because I happen to have more money than you and I'm a creditor, but because where was this item? Where was the watch? It was in my possession. So I have more likelihood of figuring out who stole it. Why? I know who goes in and out of my house. So I have an inkling of who theoretically I might be able to find it. Therefore, there's a chance that, again, it's not clear I can find the ganav. Who knows? Maybe someone snuck in when I didn't know. But maybe I had people coming in and out of my house. I had a party. I could go through the list and think who came in. I had workers. Who knows? Maybe there's more of a chance I could find it. But and therefore I could go find it. But how does the borrower have any idea who went into my house and who stole? I mean, basically everyone in the world is a possibility. So they have a very little chance of finding the ganav. Okay, so that is option number 2. So again, let's just go through it. Option number 2 was there's witnesses it was stolen, in which case I didn't take the oath. And there's concern that I might just pull it out, right? I didn't take the first oath on, it wasn't in my domain. I didn't need to. And then there's concern I might pull it out because I might be able to, once you take the oath, I might say, oh, I don't want to end up losing money. So I'll go search high and low to find the thief to prove what it was worth. And then I'll be able to get my money back. Third answer. Okay. If I take an oath that says, I swear it's not in my domain, and then you take this oath and say, oh, well, I'm going to take an oath about its worth, and I'm now going to lose money. Maybe I was lying, and now I'm going to say, oh, by the way, I found it. Or maybe it could be I did find it. How many times, and we're going to talk about this later, right? You lose things, and then you somehow find them. Okay, I spent like an hour looking for something last night in my house, so this is well in my head. I'm hoping that I will still find it, right? But right now, it's totally lost. So maybe we're worried that I might claim, in other words, I could claim it's not in my domain. And then later I could pull it out. It's not like I'd look like a dishonest person. I could say, really, it was lost then. Like if I had to take an oath right now, I would say this item is lost, right? I can't find it anywhere, but doesn't mean I can't pull it out later. So the fact that I took that first oath doesn't preclude me from pulling it out later. And that's why I'm the one who always has to take the oath. The second oath about how much it's worth. Fourth answer, and this is going to basically undermine the whole question because it's going to tell us we didn't understand it in the beginning. Okay, fourth answer is going to say, what? Okay, let's go back to the line first in the braita that said the important thing that got us on this track. Mi nishba, who swears? Mi sha pikadon etzlo, the one who the pikadon is in their hands, the malveh, right, who has the collateral. Shema yishava zev yotzi alat pikadon, right, because maybe I'll pull out the pikadon. Well, Rav Ashi Amal, zev nishba. This doesn't mean what you thought it meant. It doesn't mean that in case number 2, when the love was moda b'miktzat, the malva takes the oath. No. Zenishba v'zenishba. They both take oaths, exactly as we expect, according to Rav Huna. Zenishba she'ena b'rshuto. I take an oath first that it's not mine and not in my possession anymore. Not that it's not mine, sorry. It's not in my possession. And the love, when the love is moda b'miktzat, admits to part, well, then the love takes an oath that the value is exactly what the love says and not any less. The hachi kamar. So now the problem is, what does it mean? There it said, who takes the oath? The one who the pikadon is by it. Only the malveh. So what does it mean? Mi nishbat chila. It's a matter of who takes the oath first. Again, it's not the simple reading, but it does resolve the problem very easily. And basically says that Rav Huna is even in the Mishna. Again, Rav Huna was later, but what Rav Huna's halacha is in the braita. Who takes the oath first? Ma v'nishbat chila. Obviously, before we even start the discussion, before we start debating how much it's worth in having oaths, first I have to come and say it's not in my domain. Shema yishava zevi yotzi alat bikadon, so that you don't take the oath and then I pull it out. So first we have to deal with and get it off the table, the fact that this object is not in my possession. Once I do that, then you can take the modeh b'miktzat oath. And with that, we resolve the issue. Okay, so we have 4 answers. The first one about Edim Shenisrafa is definitely not a good answer, but the other 3 are all possible answers. Now we're going to go on. Another problem with this braita. Rav Huna bar Tachlit b'mishmei de Rav Amar Reisha de Seifa. Okay, because there's 2 parts. The Reisha is the beginning part. The Seifa is the second part, but there's 4 cases. So the Reisha of the Seifa means the beginning case of the second section, which means case number 3. Case number 3 was where the Malva denies the entire claim of the Love, that it was worth double, and the Malva says, what are you talking about? It was worth the exact worth of the loan, and the Malva doesn't need to take an oath. Now they're going to say, that also raises a question against Rav Huna. So question number 2 on Rav Huna. Reisha de Seifa tiyuv to the Rav Huna. Why is this? So now they're going to read the case. Sela Hovitani alav. He loaned me money for a sell. He loaned me a sell of money. Shtayim ayashaveh. I gave him a pikadon of 2 times the worth. And the Malva says, Lo ki ela sela vitani alacha sela yashaveh. It was exactly the right amount. The tour is exempt. Bin italid de Rav Huna. Now, if Rav Huna is right, that I have to take an oath as the Malva, that it's not in my domain, well then, do you remember something called Gilgul Shvua? What's Gilgul Shvua? Once I'm obligated one oath, we make me take another oath that I'm not, an oath that I wouldn't be obligated necessarily otherwise. But if I'm already taking an oath, and it's the whole thing is we don't want people taking oaths. Once I'm already taking an oath, we just can add other things that we have disagreements about. So if that's the case in Ita the Rav Huna, Migo de Mishtaba Malve She'ena B'Shuto, if the Malve is already taking an oath that it's not in my domain, Lishta Banami Agil Shvua Kama Yashaveh, then I should also have to say it was worth only a sela. And that's not what it says. So that seems to be difficult. Rav Ashi says, Amarita l'shmate k'mei Rav Kahana. I brought this in front of Rav Kahana and asked him what the story is. V'amarli tehebim amino. You would have to explain the braita was in a case where the lova trusted the malva about the loss. Okay, when the malva comes and says, "I lost it," the lova says, "I believe you," and then there's no need for a shvur. If the lova believes, okay, now obviously we're going to keep going on now with some questions. What do you mean? If there was trust between the two, there obviously isn't trust between the two because they have this whole debate about its worth. So we're going to differentiate between the issues again. Till now we've been differentiating. One is an oath that got lost, and the other is the oath, how much it's worth. So here also we're going to differentiate. So they say, well, if the lova trusts the malve, then so he should trust him across the board and he should believe him about how much it's worth. No, that's different. Okay, so basically I lent you money and then I claim that the collateral you gave me, the watch was lost. You believe me that the watch was lost, but you don't believe me when I say it was only worth two dinarim. Why? Well, lokim lebigave. Because you say, look, how on earth is Michelle going to know the value of the watch? I gave her the watch as collateral. She stuck it in some place, never really looked at it, didn't assess it, and now it's lost. So how would I know what the watch is worth? It's not mine. I didn't use it, right? So they say, okay, if that's the case though, then basically, shouldn't we assume that if there's a debate between you and me about what it's worth, we should believe you because you know what it's worth. You used the watch. It was your watch. So nehemne malve lelova, and shouldn't I trust you then? If I don't really know its worth, that's what we're assuming objectively. I probably don't know its worth. Then I should believe you to kimle b'gavei because it was by you for a long time and you used it. So they say, lo mehemenle, no, I don't trust you. Okay. So now we have, right, you trust me about its value. You don't that I say I lost it. You don't trust me about its value because I'm not believed about value in general, about this kind of stuff because I didn't really use it. And I don't trust you about when your claim about the value because I just don't trust you as a human being. So now they're going to say something's a little weird here with this relationship. Mishna lova de mehem le malve, mishna malve de lo mehem le love. Why? In general, you trust me. And in general, I don't trust you. Why is that? Why are we making an assumption that you would trust me, but I wouldn't trust you? Again, the only thing you don't trust me about is the value, and that's a side point. But overall, you trust me, but I don't trust you overall. And now they're going to quote a pasuk from Mishna, and they're going to say, Love mekayim b'malve, the beginning of this pasuk. The love, when he looks at the malve, he says, oh, this must be true about you. Tumat yesharim tanchem. The simpleness or the innocence of the people who are straight guides them in life and basically makes them wealthy. This is a pasuk saying, okay, it's the opposite of tzaddik v'ralo, rashava tovlo. This is saying people who are rich, it's because they went on a straight path, and a straight path leads to richness. I guess that's the way to say it. So, who's rich here? The malve. Who's poor? The love. That's why the love is borrowing money from the rich person. So the fact that I'm rich is indicative of the fact that I must be an honest person. Again, we know this isn't necessarily true, but this is what they're using as their answer. And malve, b'kaim lebelove, the continuation of that pasuk. When the malve looks at the love, the malve says, oh, look at the rest of that pasuk. Selef bodim yeshadem. The terrible, deceptive behavior of people is what causes them to lose their money. So the fact that you're poor must be indicative that you're not an honest person. So basically, because of that, we can explain why the love might believe the malve, but the malve might not believe the love. But there's other ways you could say it also. I mean, we've had, this comes up before, that the love basically got, the malve did a good deed for the love by giving him money. And to a certain extent, the love, there's a pasuk that says, Eved love li'ish malve. It's also from Mishle. That the love, basically a borrower, subjugates himself to a certain extent to the malve because the malve did him a good deed. And therefore, to a certain extent, you could say he also has trust. Anyway, it's weird to say that the malve doesn't trust the love. He lent him money, he was hoping to get it back. So it's a little bit, but you could say he still doesn't believe him about the value. Okay, that's resolving question number 2 against Rav Huna. Now we're going to move to a story. The title is Kifei de Rav Nachman. Okay, the case of the jewelry of Rav Nachman. It sounds like a mystery. Here we go. So somebody gave this fancy jewelry, see in a minute, it was obviously very expensive jewelry, to his friend to watch. Amarli havli kife, and the guy comes back and says, I want my jewelry. Amarli lo yadana hecha utvinu. Big problem. He says, listen, I put it somewhere. I don't know where. I can't remember. It's a big debate among the Rishonim. Was this meaning I put it in some unsafe place and I have no idea where, or maybe I put it in a safe place, right? How many times do we do this? We hide something in a really safe place, so safe that we can't even remember where we put it. Okay. It's a debate here whether he was, even more wrong about the fact, he obviously was wrong in the fact that he didn't remember where he left it, but he might even be more wrong in the fact that maybe he even left it in a place that wasn't protected, but that's a side issue among the Rishonim, whether he put it in a protected space or not protected space. Leave it aside right now. Since I don't remember where I put your jewelry. Answer the Kameh to Rav Nachman. So they come before Rav Nachman, Amarle, Kol lo yadana pshiutahi. When you say I don't know, normally you're not liable for Aveda, right? If you're a shomer chinam, let's assume he was a shomer chinam. But if you said I don't know where I put it, that's your fault. Okay? So Zil Shleim, pay. Lo Shilem. Guy decides not to pay. Azar Rav Nachman Agvela Pandimine. He takes away his palace. Okay? That's why the jewelry must have been expensive, because he takes the palace in place of the jewelry, presuming they were the same price. L'sof ishtakach kife. Somehow man magically remembers where it was, finds the kife, v'iyakum. But they went up in value now. Okay, this brings us back to our Mishnah. A shomer chinam, let's say, right, who pays, what does he gain? He gains the rights to the kefel. So maybe this person who already paid the palace, maybe he gets to keep the jewelry, and now the jewelry went up in value, gets to keep it with the increase in value. So Amar Rav Nachman, no way, no how. Hadre kifil marayu, hadra pandalamari. Give it back, okay? Give him back his jewelry. He gets the jewelry at the higher amount, the original owner. You get your palace back. Amar Rava, we're going to do a few things about this now. So the first thing is compare this to our Mishnah. Amar Rava, now Rava tells a story, and he says the following. Havi Yativna, this is like a big quote of Rav. I was sitting Kamei to Rav Nachman, before Rav Nachman when this happened. Upirkana mafkid havi. We were learning, I like this line, we were learning perika mafkid, which is what we're learning. It's like when you're reading a book and they're reading the book in the book, right? Unless you have books like that. So we were learning perika mafkid. And I said to him, hey, wait a minute. How did you do this? Shilem v'lo ratzali shava. right? Below, okay, shilem below tzali shava. And then what happens? You get the kefel. So why doesn't he gain this increase in price? Below Hadran, and Rav Nachman ignored me. Okay, this is Rava still talking. Rav Nachman totally ignored me, didn't even address my question. And you know what? He was right for not answering me, because obviously what did Rava do? He did some soul searching, or book searching, and said, okay, obviously I'm misunderstanding something if you didn't answer me. And then he realizes that he's wrong, because the two cases are very different. My timer, hatam lo etrachei lebeidin. In the case of Shilem V'lo Ratzal Shaban, we didn't talk about this when we learned it, but the commentaries actually discussed it, and it's on the basis of this. One of the reasons why you get the kefel is because you immediately paid without going to court and having, if you had to take the oath and say, I'm exempt, you'd have to go to court, you would in court, you would have made the guy go to court with you. That's a pain in the neck. So because you saved them all that time of going to the Beit Din, that's why they're willing to give you the rights to the kefel. But hacha lo etrachei lebeidina. But hacha etrachei lebeidina. Here they had to go to court. Remember, they went for Rav Nachman, and then he wouldn't even pay. It's a whole different story. You don't gain rights to, like, of course, the guy's not going to give you rights after you made his life miserable and he had to chase you down and all that. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two. That's going to get us on a whole other tangent, which is L'meimer desavar Rav Nachman de Shuma Hadar, and now we're going to get off on a totally different topic, which is, are you going to say that when you assess property and take property in place of, for example, a loan, as opposed to this, which was not a loan, but when you assess property and then the person now has the money, let's say I lent you money and you didn't have money to pay. So the court assessed your property, took your land away. What if you now have money to pay the loan back? Can you get your land back? So if Rav Nachman basically gave the land back to, even though he did it for other reasons, but he gave the land back to the original person he took the land from, the one who owed the money, and he gave the jewelry back. So would you infer from here that if there was a loan and the borrower had the money to pay back, they'd pay back the money and get their land back? Would they be able to get their land back? So can you assume that Rav Nachman says that? Because that's what he did here. They're saying no. This is totally different. Shani hatan deshuma b'ta'ut hava. This was a mistake. Meaning, what was a mistake? Well, there was a mistake because the guy claimed he didn't have the jewelry and he really did have the jewelry. So they took the palace from him really by mistake, not really by mistake at the time. That was what they had to rule, but it was, okay, first of all, by mistake also could be that the person who had the jewelry was really mistaken. In other words, all of this is going to go back because he was wrong, and the whole case was all wrong from the beginning. That's not the same when someone owes money and just doesn't have the cash to pay and we seize their property. So no, you can't learn from here. However, okay, and to have kifim incur, because he really did have the jewelry when he said he didn't. Again, we don't think he was lying, but there was a mistake. The whole thing was premised on a mistake, and that's why the whole thing could go back very easily. But you wouldn't necessarily learn that for a loan. But now, Amri Nehardea, they say, Shuma Hadar Atresa Yarchisha. If your property is seized because you had a loan and you didn't pay it back, you have up to a year to get your land back. If you produce the money, you can get your land back. But they even say, Amar Amemar, Anami Nehardea, I'm from Nehardea, where you just said they said up to 12 months. You could always get your money back. And in fact, the Gemara says, your land back. But for what reason? Not for legal halachic reasons. Because, as we say, meshurat. It's a good time to remind you that if you haven't heard it, the last shiur, I think it was the last shiur of Alana Steinheim, was about meshurat. Very interesting shiur about how we understand this concept of meshurat. And basically, right here again, we have it. Second time we've seen this. The halacha is based on meshurat. We always think meshurat is beyond the letter of the law. No, this is actually saying the law is based on meshurat. Okay, about this is the right thing to do. Because when the person gave up their land, they didn't really want to give up their land. They had no choice. So give them back their land. And now we're going to be off on a tangent about seizing land and all this. Pshita shamule lebalchov, ba'atal iyuv shamule lebalchov dide, amrina le lo adib at migaver da'at mine. Okay, I know there was a lot of words. I'll explain them right now. It's obvious in a case where I seized your property because you couldn't pay me back, and then I used it to pay for property for a loan that I owed. In other words, I owed money to seize the property that I took from you. So basically, it's like transitive property, right? Your property ended up in the hands of a third person because I also had a loan out that I didn't have the money to pay for. So pshita in the case where Shamale the Balchov, we assessed your property, took it from you. I'm now going through the words. And then it was assessed for me to give to somebody else who I owe money to. Amrinale, you can say to them, you can go straight to that person, transitive property, and get your land back. Because you can say to them, Lo adif ad, you're no better. You're no better than Michelle. I could have gotten it back from Michelle. I can get it back from you because you basically took it in the same way that Michelle sees my land. Okay, we'll see in a minute what the difference is. But Zavno or Tavyave b'matana. But if I sold the land to someone that I seized from you, or I bequeathed it to somebody, I told them when I die it will be yours, and then I died, or I gave it as a gift, which is all one. This, that's it's just like the bequeathing. It's a type of gift. They took the land wanting it to acquire the land. They wanted land. When my creditor seized my property, they really wanted the money back, not land, right? They got land because there was no money, but they didn't go for it looking for land. But when I sold my property to someone, they bought it for the land. If they bought it for the land, you can't give them money and take the land back because they don't want money. They paid money to get land. So if it was someone who wanted money and seized it for the money, but I didn't have money, they took it so you can get it back from them. But if I sold it to someone, if they were a buyer, then no. And because of that, they're now going to talk about a case of a woman and a husband. If a woman had this issue and then she got married, so she had property that was her own, and either she was the borrower and they seized her property, or she was the lender and basically seized someone else's property, and then she gets married. Now her husband has rights to the payroll, and when she dies, he inherits. So now, inherit, you would think he just comes in her place, okay? And then he would be able to be in that same position as she was. But the Gemara is going to say no. Then now we're going to say, when it comes to her possessions, he's like a buyer. How do we know this? We'll see in a minute. And therefore, since he's like a buyer, what do we say? A buyer, right? There is no such thing as taking the land away from them. They get to keep the land, okay? So if somebody comes and tries to claim it back, they won't get it from the husband. Okay, this is if she dies. Okay, actually, there's a debate among the commentators, but we'll go with the if she dies and he's now the owner, he's like a purchaser. Okay, and this will remind you of something we learned in the past, but we'll see it again now. So lo mahadra v'lo mahadrin, so whichever, right, he can't demand it back from someone else if someone sees the wife's property, and someone else can't demand it back from him if, right, the wife had taken, if the wife had taken the property from someone else as a creditor, so they can't take it back from the husband, the borrower. And the reverse case, if she had to pay it for a loan she had, the husband can't retrieve her land back. Okay, it goes good for him and not good for him, depending on the case. Either which way is viewed like a buyer. How do we know this? It's only because of Takana Chachamim. But in Usha, they made this Takana. If she sold her Nichsei Malog, now remember, Nichsei Malog, he gets the fruits, all the produce while they're married, but she owns the body of it. She owns the principal. Now, so she could sell the rights to the principal, which would mean in the event that she dies, they will own it, right? It will go to them and the husband won't inherit it. But if she sells them and she dies, he can demand it back from those people, because what happens really when she dies, again, this is just takanat usha, and this is to prevent strife in a relationship. The woman might sell property that he's, okay, let's say she sells her usufruct property while they're, this is nichsei malog, while they're married. So she inherits property and then she's married, it's her property, but he has rights to the produce. So she could sell it, which means right now, all the produce still goes to the husband. When he dies, it's supposed to go to those, when she dies, it's supposed to go to those people. If the husband dies first and then she dies, they will get it. But if she dies first, the husband isn't like an heir. He's viewed like a buyer. And when? From the moment of the marriage. In other words, retroactively, he becomes a buyer from the moment they got married, which means that she never sold it because it was never hers to sell. So that proves that it's because of the Takanah Usha, he's considered like a buyer. And that has ramifications for the case we just discussed. Now, moving now to Amud Bet. Told you it's a bit of a long daf. Agbe, the second half will hopefully be quicker. Agbe ihu bechovo. What if what happens is somebody demands, 1 second, let me remember. Right, okay. If this was all when they seized property, okay, so what happened? You owed me money and you didn't pay, and I took you to court, and the court seized your property, and then we assume, right, you definitely didn't give your property wholeheartedly, and therefore you didn't really ever mean to give it to me, and that's why I have to really give it back to you. What if you owe me money, and instead of me taking you to court, you just offered, you know what, I don't have the money, I'll just give you my land. Now, are you allowed to get it back? Because when you have the money, because we could say, okay, we're going to read it right now. Let's read it inside. They disagree. We don't know who says what. Chadamar hadra, chadamar lo hadra. One says you could get your land back anyway, and the other one says you can't. Manda amar lo hadra, the one who says you can't get your land back, savar haizvinim al yehi, says you can't get your money back because this is like a sale. It's a really good sale. The hamidata dinafshe agbe, because you gave it to me of your own free volition, right? We didn't, again, you were forced to, but no one was, forcing you. There was no court involved. You just said, here, take my land. Umanda Amar Hadra, the one who says it goes back, says, Savar los vinim al yehu. This is not a good sale because Haida Agve midate velo ate lidina. The reason why you did it on your own and not bringing it to court was machmaki sufu da'agbe. You just didn't want to be humiliated in court and have the court go assess your property and all that. You didn't want to go through that humiliating process, so you just offered it. But of course you were forced into doing it. In other words, you knew that it would eventually happen, and you'd rather just do it in this way rather than waste your time and be humiliated. So you didn't really mean to give it to me for forever, and therefore you still can get it back. Last question for this topic, and then we'll move to the new Mishna. Me'emat achil peri. At what point, so because now we're just off on this tangent about seizing property. So if you owe me money and I can seize your property, the court gives me an adrachta, if you remember, which means I can go find property of yours and seize it because you're not paying the money back. And then I get this document, and then we go assess your property, right? Then I look around, I find, oh, here's a property that's worth around that probably. Let me go get it assessed. We get it assessed, and then they do what's called a hakraza. And they start announcing, and they start like a bid, like an auction. Okay? And people bid on it to see what kind of price we can get for the land to be able to assess the value. And if I pay the highest bid, then, or whatever. Okay, we won't get into all the details. But the question is, at what stage in this process do I get the payroll? Meaning, I might get the land, let's say we start the process in January, and I might get the land only in June. Can I get all the produce from January? Because really it was mine from the time the court ruled that it's mine. So that's the question. At what stage? Rabba amar michimate adrachta liyade. As soon as I get that adrachta document in my hand that I can go look for property of yours, when I eventually take your property, I can demand all the produce from that date. Abai amar eda b'chatumav zachima. We've seen this already a few times. Abai says it's earlier than that. Not when I get the adrachta, it's when they write the adrachta, which could happen on the same day, could happen on a different day. Could be I don't live right near there till I got the document. As soon as it's signed, we have the date on the document, that's good enough. Rava gives a much later date. Amar mechish limu yimech rasta. When the whole bidding process is over, then I get it. Only at the very end, only from that day do I get payroll. Now we're going to get to an interesting mission. We already discussed that basically there's a case where I can be watching something of yours and I can end up making money on the deal, right? Because I'm watching your object. And then if I pay the value, I can get the double, right? I can get the extra payment. So I can actually make money off your property. Well, here's a more extreme case where I can make money off your property. And we're going to see Rabbi Yossi disagrees. And a few dapim, we're going to get to a debate. Does Rabbi Yossi also disagree with the previous mission? Because Rabbi Yossi says, how can you make money off someone else's object? Okay, but let's see the case. Hasocher para mechaviro. I rent a para from you. Vihish'ila la'acher. And then I let someone else borrow it. So I'm renting your object. It would have to be a renter because if I was a shomer chinam or shomer sachar, I can't use the item. I certainly can't give it to someone else to use. But if I rented it from you, paid money, and then I lend it to someone. It's like subletting, okay? Except subletting an object. And I lend it to someone else, except that I didn't rent it, right? Sublet, usually people pay. If I let my friend stay in my apartment for the weekend, that's something different, right? Umeta kedarka, and the animal dies in a normal way, right? Natural way. Now, what does that mean? It means that basically that's called ones, meta kedarka. The shoel is liable. The socher is exempt. So the original agreement between the owner and the person was a schira agreement. So the socher is actually exempt. But it was being used by a shoel who's actually obligated. So what happens? Yishavah socher shemeta kedarka. So the socher swears that it died this kedarka, which is ones, which means basically I'm exempt. Okay? V'hashoel yishalem lasocher. The shoel, because the shoel borrowed it from the renter, so the shoel is obligated to who did they pay? To the one who rented it. So the one who rents basically makes money off of this deal. To which Rabbi Yossi says, I'm Rabbi Yossi. No way, no how can you start making money off of someone else's object. Ella tachzor parada ba'alim. For sure it goes back to the original owner, says Rabbi Yossi. Interesting to note, and we'll get to this later in a few dapim, Rabbi Yossi actually paskin this way, okay? This is not Metzia Machma Malacha. Metzia Machma Malacha is the only case that a shoel is patur. Okay, we don't have time to go into this today, but that's a case of shoel be patur. This is Meita Kedarka, okay? This is just, it dropped dead, okay? That's ones that the shoel will be chayav for. Now, Amarle Rav Idi bar Avin Labai. Michdi socher b'mai kane lahai para b'shvua. So now Rav Idi bar Avin has a question. He says, listen, I'm assuming that the reason why the socher, okay, let's go back to the previous Mishna. On what basis did the shomer get rights to the kefel? By paying, right? Or by saying they were going to pay. In this case, by what rights? Must be because he took an oath, right? Because it says in the Mishnah, he takes an oath that proving, right? That's his way of proving that it just was Meita Kedarka and he's exempt. If that's the case, well, if you were the owner, what should you just do? The renter, right? The one who rented it, the one who originally owns it, should just go to the socher and say, listen, dal ant v'dal shvuatech, off to you and off to your shvua. I don't want your shvua. Don't take an oath to me. And I'll just deal with the shoel. And that way he won't lose his money. Because basically, he's totally losing all his money, right? And I'll take it up with the shoel. Now, well, it's true he's losing his money, okay? But again, he would have lost his money anyway if the socher had it. The only issue here is that there is money to be made and he's not making it. So if it's all because of the shvua, why doesn't he just tell him, don't take a shvua, and then I'll just deal directly, right? So Amar Le, Abai says, it's not because he took a shvua that he acquires the rights. It's mishat mitu dekane. It's as soon as the animal died, which has nothing to do with some action that now they're taking. It's at the death of the animal when the socher became exempted and he lent it to a shoel, right? Ushvua is just kedei lafis tatel shabal habayit. The shvua is a side factor. It's really from the moment of death he acquired the rights to it. And therefore, by being exempt and having lent it to someone and there is payment, he already acquired the rights. The shvua is not what makes him acquire the rights. The shvua is just to make the Baal Bayit feel better, that the Baal Bayit's not going to get anything. He wants to be sure that he's really not deserving of anything. And therefore, you have to take the shvua. Now we get to this really absurd case. And perhaps they're trying to raise the absurdity with this whole case as it is. I'm a Rabbi Zera. And this is going to lead your Yirmiyah into a crazy case that really has much less to do with this. But that's going to be tomorrow. There could be a case where the owner pays a number of animals to the renter. What on earth are we talking about? We never had the owner paying anything. Well, hechidami. What's the case? Now again, it's a crazy case. Okay, there's you and me. You're the owner. I'm the renter. I rent an animal for you for 100 days. But you, okay, we're going to go with the basic interpretation, even though some say it otherwise. You then say to me immediately after, you know what? I want to borrow it back from you. I rented it to you for 100 days. I know I have a contract. I can't break the contract, but will you lend it to me for 90 days? I say, sure, no problem. I lend it to you for 90 days. So basically it means the first 90 days, it'll be yours. Then the next 10 days I'll be able to rent it. But then I say, you know what? Out of those 90 days you want to borrow it, can I rent it back for another 80 days? So now first 80 days, it's mine. I'm renting it, right? Then you'll have it for 10 to borrow, and then I'll have it back to rent for another 10. Okay, we could go on and on, but thank God they stop here. You rent it back from me. So you're the owner, but I'm sorry, you borrow it back from me. You're the owner, but you're also a borrower. Okay, you see where this is going. And then within those 70 days that you're now borrowing it, it dies. So now we had two borrowing agreements between us. So for each borrowing agreement, you now have to pay me 2 cows. And, right? And now again, because I'm not obligated to anything because it was made to Kedarka. And okay, it doesn't say this, but you're going to have to also give me 2 cows for the 2 10-day rental times that I need. Now, some people say it's only 1 cow. Some people say it's 2 cows, but basically I'm still supposed to rent it for 10 days times 2. So you owe me those 10 days times 2 also. So you're going to have to give me 2 animals temporarily for 10 days. And you're going to have to give me the value of 2 full animals that basically died while you were borrowing it, even though you're the owner. An insane case. I'm going to Rav Nachman difti le Ravina. So what are you talking about? In the end, it was only 1 parah. It went back and forth from Shiur. You can't look at these as separate agreements. You're not going to get 2 cows plus another 2 cows. That's crazy. Amarle, what do you mean? Umi to the parah be'ene dinema lehachi. In the end, there isn't 1 parah that's standing in front of us. The parah is dead. So because of that, we have to look at the agreements. And yeah, there's 2 rental agreements and 2 borrowing agreements, and yeah, we're going to say 4. But Marbar of Ashi Amar, he goes back to what Rav Nachman Difti says, and he says, in the end, it's really only 2. Okay, this is a disagreement. One says 4, he says 2. Because shum sheila achati v'shum schirut achad. Sheila kan legamre, the schirut ava b'yimei schirutah, umehado le'lamari. He says, basically, we put all the she'ela into one agreement, in other words, because they overlap. So it's really 1 borrowing agreement, 1 rental agreement. The one that's borrowed, you have to pay back the full value. That's she'ela kani legamri. You get the full value. The schirut, you do yemei schirutah, you work the days you're supposed to, right? Those 20 days, umehado le'lamari, and then you give it. So we have this debate, can you get 4 or can you get 2? Either which way, the original owner is going to actually end up having to pay, which is crazy. Okay, we're going to stop here for today. Let's do a quick review, even though it was a lot of different topics. We started with this big question of Rav Huna and the contradiction of this braita. We had 2 issues in the end with the contradiction. The first issue we resolved in 4 ways, although 1 was rejected. The second issue we also resolved in terms of there was trust between them partially, just not about everything. And then we went to this kifeh of Rav Nachman, and from there we got into the shuma about can you return just like he returned the money and the jewelry and the palace. Is it the same thing in a Baal Chov when they take the nechasim meshuvadim, the lien property? Can you get your land back? And in the end, we say yes, but only really lifnei meshurat the din. Okay, but it is the din. It's just the din it's really beyond the letter of the law. And then we got into cases where it does work, cases where you can't do it, like if there's a buyer or if the husband who's like a buyer, etc. Then we got into this case of renting the parah and then loaning it out, and how, according to Tanakh Tama, the socher can actually get the value of it and not the original owner, to which Rabbi Yossi says, no way, no how can the socher make money off of someone else's property. Okay, and then we got into how there could be this absolutely ridiculous case that could come out of it. And with that, we finish for today. Wishing everybody a great day. Reminder, no Zoom for the next 2 days. See you back on Zoom on Sunday, but all the shiurim will be up early so everyone can learn without the Zoom. Have a great day, everyone.